Hello everyone, my name is Jackie Martinez. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to say welcome to everybody. I get a little nervous doing these introductions, so I'm going to rely my paper. All right, so thank you for celebrating Black History Month with the Livermore Public Library. Tonight we are honored to have Bay Area poets Alie Jones, Tongo Eisen-Martin, Landon Smith, and Meilani Clay for a poetry reading and panel discussion. Please indulge in the delicious charcuterie boards and apple cider that we have. Get to meet members of the Tri-Valley for Black Lives, who are providing information about their organization's community engagement, such as their Juneteenth festival on Saturday, June 17th at the Bankhead. And check out our library's resources, Alie's resources, and the resources for Tri-Valley for Black Lives. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the friends. Yeah, because it's over here, but I'll move it out of the way.
I was like, I don't want any feedback.
Yeah.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome again. My name is Alie Jones. I am co-founder and director of Black Creator Press. Really excited to be here, holding space tonight with some of my favorite poets. Our first, we're in the children's section.
Yes.
Our first poet for tonight is the 8th poet laureate of San Francisco. He is also a lover of almonds, and I don't know, it's just random. I love random bios, y'all. If you know anything about me, you can go read his bio anywhere, but there's things you might not know. So, without further ado, Tongo Eisen-Martin. You just hold it, and you can clip it.
Hello. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pennies at my mugshot negative. All over the United States, there are toddlers in the rock. I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket, and why blood agreements mean a lot, and why I get shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history or take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm, ricochet sewage near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti in a kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up. House of God in part, no cops in part, my body brings down to Christmas. The new bullets, pray over blankets made from the old bullets, pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark, extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration, the waistband before the next protest post. Hey, by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your deaths for last. You're witty, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It's only raining one thing. Non-white cops and prison guard shadows reminded me of spoiled milk floating on the oil spill. The neighborhood making a lot of fuss over its demise. A new late for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder. The fig in the village. A new noose to a new white preacher. All in an abstract painting of a president. Bought slavery some time, didn't it? The tents screeches of military boats and election Tuesday. Cars of cold-blooded stallion leg irons proof that some white people have actually found the nooses there. Sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque piece plastic and boat action audiences. The Medgar every second is definitely my favorite law of science. Found of news clippings and primitive Methodists, my arm changes imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even wider white spectrums, artists bleeding, and the challenge of watching civilians think. Terrible rituals they have around the corner. They let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads in the arrows myself and see how much gravy spills out of family crest. Modern fans of war with their t-shirt poems and t-shirt guilt. And me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus, I have no choice but to read the city walls for signs of my life. These little societies wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. Citizen testaments bent on offering me a nation of breadwinners to hold me back like it's a Brinks. I read with the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence turned away from a podium into the reeds like God is a dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop balcony on my bedroom floor. You know they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you in your broken neck from their foolish euphoria. From the loyalty over their grave superstition, loyalty over their agrarian reform, I return to my mother completely disrespected. For peeling the heat off of purgatory, they kill poets like me. walked me away from my poems, never to be heard from again. In this fine industrial complex of bloodlines picked over, picked through, a sport and spiritual death of your devil at least half made police become a pretty word. I'm reading a lynch mob shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in the mirror, people. Tyranny against your chump times, your chump to be mocking you with a gun in your car. A cupid of needlework spelled tuned for the proletariat, the relapse ministry. Talented people curled up in a fetal position next to a diamond dime. Just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism, in a bouquet of surveillance cameras, in the poverty of God. New blue eyes, corpses of water, a newly potted presidency. A one big shiny coin against the animated capitalism and other non-literal boys. Killing is white freedom. The deification of hyphens. Medicine bread and picture shows. Great protesters in LA. Guess of our ink. Drop kicking Rose in the graveyard. DC mink like a stone 20 and half the pen advances. Despite CIA guideposts, despite non-African past and futures, a metaphorical but not surreal day in a horn-ridden life form player improvising king. Like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself, a real hand sweeps the land of racism. May I return to the ground. May I make progress with the gun. I'm not Mother Emmanuel they put on music that evening. A swinging tight body language for you to drink with fermented $5 bills. For your body language, some applause. My pastor Meilani, neither a good thing nor a bad thing like being psychic on the way with a lethal injection. Here to sit you down with Lady Day. Lady Day leading youth who surrender their souls to Africa too soon. Potty thought floating in a cup of water, she saved me. Access in my stomach. Accessing the love of the American lynched. Cold sleeves, wooden and avalanche into the wrist. Our Mother Emmanuel, avalanche into the sharp keys. Pain, the deal you make with pain. I mean, the piano makes sense for them. Laying hands on the world gradually. Addressing the bending necks on the streets of the north. Travel sailing in pain, repeating pain in the north. 10 tricky fingers on that piano harmony would have me. Putting 100 fights on every direct scar. But Lady Day leaning on trees again, recruiting the countryside itself, saying lay your plan on this lightning. Make your poems a corner pocket of men. I agree that the bruise itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet. Killing without killing. Never mind this little painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching. A crow's passing. Good and dead by the afternoon. You know, all street life, to a certain extent, starts fear. Sometimes, with a spiritual memory even. Pre-dawn soul clap, your father dying even. Maybe I pushed the city too far. My sensitivities to landfill, district thing, and minstrel whistles, white supremacist graffiti on westbound rail cars, all over coming reauthored. Reauthored by revolutionary violence that chose its own protagonists on muted stage of genius, the garbage of growing voices. Condensed Marxism for warrior depressives, unimpassed in their pockets because they just might be deities, a decent bit on the panther name of merciful Marxism. Disquieted home life, a metaphor for relaxing next to a person who's relaxing next to a gun. I stare at my father for a few seconds, then return to my upbringing. Return to the souls of Ohio black folk, no revolution down here, pagan at this point. You know what the clown wants, the respect of the ant. Wants some interpret paint only, wants to pull a 38 out of a begging bowl, wants me to hurt my hand on this pen. I'm not tired of these rooms, just tired of the world to give them a relativity. My only change of clothes prosecuted the government finally learned how to write poems, shootouts that briefly align and make up a parable. Or parables like the white bodies are paid well. Do white men even have leaders? Are all white people white men? A rat pierces a river, can almost taste the racial divide, can almost roll a family member's head into a city hall legislative chamber, knows who in this, I mean, all I do is practice, Lord, deciding not to talk out of anger ever again. Met my wife at the same time I met new audience members for our pain. We passed each other cigarettes and watched cops win. The city going uniquely linear, Harlem of the West, do a true universe. I mean, I'll always remember you in fancy clothes, my wife said. So here I sit, twisting in silk ideation. Rifle made of postbellum targets made of honest language. The San Francisco poetry is how God knows it's me whining. Riding among the lesser respected wolves, lesser preserved militarization. Dixie-less prison bookkeeping, the California gray coats are coming. Lynch mob gossip and bourgeois debt collection is tempting to change professions mid-poem. And the Chicago briefing, a white sergeant saying blank slate for all of us after this black organizer is dead. Standard academics toasting two-buck wine at the tank parade. They have nothing, Lord, just nuclear cobblestones, gun-line athleticism, and the last to be inherited asthma. Children giving white dolls that play within fear, facial expressions borrowed from rich people's shoestrings. I can hear hate and teach hate and call tools by people names and name people dead to themselves. No one get naturalized except these federal agents soon. Carving the equator in the throat. So I'm sorry to make you relive all this, Lord, all this pre-dawn monarchy friends putting up politician posters and snorting the remainder of the pace. Minstrel script shoved into the walls by their elders. My children sharpening quarters on the city's edge. For these audiences, I project myself into a ghost-like state. For these gangsters, I do the same. Every now and then, take a nervous look, eat, sleep becomes Christ, sleep starts going to racial identity. Do you ever spiral, Lord? Has the gang age betrayed us? Be patient with my poems, Lord. So much pain is a point to crime, I mean, it has to be. If race traders come with it, Lord, is that my revolver in your hand? You know, better presidents than these have yawned at cages, have called us holy slaves, filled the school libraries with cop documentaries. Baby, I don't have money for food. Why, I have no present moment at all.
Y'all, please give it up for Tongo Eisen-Martin. Yes. All right, y'all. So our next reader is an incredible writer, also published their first book, and the Picked on Rise, available at 14 Hills Press. Y'all show some love to Meilani Clay.
How's that? A little higher? Speak louder or higher? Like higher with the clip, yeah. Like that?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. The black woman is God in a world hell-bent on being heathen. Betrayed by those at our right hand, hung out to die, knowing streets and temples will teem with parishioners when it is time to mourn our passing. We show up anyway, to make feasts from scraps, wield rage for a future eons beyond this one, and yet our names are only ever uttered soft, in prayer, whispered close to clavicle and exhale on lips before sleep. We call to you over the roar of the ocean's hush, but you don't trust you enough to meet us in the storm. All our prophets must be false if our names can gild the tongues of pretentious pagans at performative protests, when only black women can hold the syllables in our mouths with the reverence they deserve. We have wept, wiped libation from our faces only to have it replaced with spit. No matter our weary, we resist rest so long as any of you are refused respite. Though our bodies blanket this earth from end to end, we continue to offer ourselves to mobs of marauders. Though we still the crashing currents to soothe your worry, we remain the black woman, a God rarely granted grace, and still how hallowed be, how hallowed be, how holy be our names. All my attackers must be R. Kelly's and Bill Cosby's, pedophiles or perverts, for me to have half a chance at being taken seriously. But the friend who trails his hand too far down my back, the lover who chooses to bury my no beneath all the yes that came before it, the boy I called myself falling for who played bass in church. None of them are monsters, yet memories of them still hide beneath my bed, breath hot with denial, whispering doubt into my dreams, without being pinned down, without being drugged, without being underage, without dark alleys and strangers with weapons. And even with any of these, my story has no teeth, nothing with which to attach itself to righteous outrage. We are never victims. Even when there is a fight and DNA under fingernails, even when there's video and scars, even when the world becomes the dumpster behind which you leave our bodies contorted and trembling, our stories are still little more than think piece fertilizer, growing clicks and traffic, but changing nothing about how we feel forced to sleep fully clothed with lights on, feel forced to never be alone, even when solitude would nourish us, feel forced to keep our stories buried out of the blazing rays of unrighteous indignation. For multitudes, there is a place between monster and human where too many travel. A Bermuda Triangle where accountability and remorse vanish in the swirling, turbulent waters of patriarchal violence. Instead of telling the truth, instead of shouting our stories into the storm to be swallowed in self-righteous solidarity, we watch as monuments and murals, accolades and opportunities are heaped upon these beings. Instead of grieve, we survive. to the elders for your understanding and graciousness. I was not taught to curse this way in front of y'all. I'm gonna do it anyway. Fuck the police. Their badges, their guns, their Ray-Bans, their boots, their grins. Fuck the politicians. Fuck the government at every level, all three branches of this cursed fig tree. Fuck the blustering about draining the swamp, fill it. Flood DC's now flavorless streets until every Volvo and S-Class rests rusting beneath the Potomac. Fuck the stock market. Fuck more expensive money made from codes instead of cotton or coin. Fuck money, period. Fuck how it's treated as deity, determining daily who gets to eat, who gets to have a home, who gets to guard it, who gets to have clean water and earth beneath their toes. Fuck asking for permission to breathe. Fuck the schools. Fuck the superintendents. Fuck the standardized tests and the scantrons they wrote in on. Fuck straight rows, blank walls, silenced children. Fuck puppet pedagogies. Fuck academic coaches and performance reviews. Fuck your principal doing the Dougie at a school assembly celebrating the perfect attendance and high GPAs of children better adjusted to our genocide than their peers. Fuck white teachers in deep East Oakland, Chicago or DC Southside, in rural black communities, anywhere at all in New Orleans. Fuck white teachers, including the ones with brown skin, making themselves martyr for student loan forgiveness. Do I really need to say fuck student loans? Fuck white people and their adjacents who still think I need to first stop and confirm they are in fact here to slit my throat and make me mop my own blood for minimum wage before decking them in the mouth, before raising strip malls, before screaming. But also fuck giving up, fuck losing sleep or working alone or limiting your imagination, fuck hopelessness, fuck silencing your rage or your grief or your joy. Most of all, fuck losing. We have a duty to win. Compromise is saying, I will give this up for you, and I will give this up for you in return, because the joy is in the giving. Knowing this, I no longer wonder at the self-indulgent ignorance white men carry with them like badges, if not of honor, then of steadfast and toxic mediocrity. So I don't crave white skin or its parasitic privileges. My soul is no longer guided by whiteness. I will not give up this penny-cheeked profile, this mighty melancholy in my bones, this libation that is my sweat and tears. Just remember, they demanded this phoenix, rising from our former hopes and handshakes with crimson wing and razor beak when we were robbed of ourselves in exchange for lost limbs and legacies, when we compromised our homes, nations, gods for shanty towns, police states, crumbling shoebox sanctuaries, when we traded our children, their buoyant self-image and melodic slang for lip fillers on porcelain teens, butchering habitual beat and viral videos. I'm just saying. With all this compromise, you'd think our very existence would be pure joy, thick and amber honey sweet. Instead, we gave muted suits and slicked scalps in exchange for ruby woo map lines and canine teeth to the calf. When we gave every mood, sermon, and music, they gave us bullets to torso, to skull, to sheetrock above once sleeping, swollen belly. Compromise with white supremacy has only ever come with promise of more loss. There is no balancing this ledger laden with our suffering, so I will no longer take responsibility for the fact a white man's imagination is a mausoleum, only capable of seeing a nation of deceased playgrounds in my eyes. I won't give up anything else when history and yesterday prove compromise is a word white men use to dream themselves anew and give up nothing in return. I didn't tell y'all, but ventriloquist is also. It's like a beat, like this. Yeah. Thank you. This way, just keep going. No. Okay. This last poem is one I wrote for my child. It is one of the hardest poems I've ever written, just as raising her is one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. I tired of writing poems for white people, so I gave birth to one they can't read. A copper-skinned poem revised for 37 weeks and 5 days. A poem with my exuberance wound helix around each curl, laughing loud toward the sky. A poem with my resistance etched into a tiny furrowed brow. I gave birth to a poem with my rage alchemized into a gilded voice, never backing down, never silent on command. A poem with my hope sewn carefully to its sternum, a little patchwork yet certain all the same. I gave birth to a poem that doesn't know any words but synonyms for love and freedom. A poem that careens down sidewalks, ecstatic shrieks, prayers laid at the highest altar. This poem's eyelids are lined with the silk of my faith. This poem is invincible. Still, one day, though I gave birth to this poem, this people's poem, I know someone will try to read her anyway. Failing, they will demand I translate, but the poem I bird was never meant for their understanding. For between the lines of this poem's lashes, I placed a single dream, a future that is this poem's and this poem's alone to write.
Where's the mic? Y'all, please get up again for me. All my favorites. I'm excited. Y'all, our next reader, I just get so excited. Each of these poets is incredible in their own right. And I feel privileged to have gotten to know this poet in so many different ways, y'all. Landon Smith is a father, professor, creator, artist, y'all. Everybody's multi-hyphenate, but for real, he's a Renaissance man, y'all. Show some love for Landon Smith.
On it.
On it.
They ain't trying to help you. It's like, what you do? You got it?
I get it.
Okay. Say something.
Got it as much as it's gonna get.
Okay.
I am not the polite poet. An unarmed ain't done shit for me, so I swore to make the next one a fair fight. Message to the grassroots vinyl scratching in the background, and if this is the last time I step in front of a mic, make sure my dead body means something to you on the way down. Alphabet raids burning my book over ritual, and if they come for me at night, that smile won't save you in the morning. And this bunker smells like 1845 plantation soil. And I drug past palm grass between my toes onto this Florida shoreline. Neither one of us supposed to be here. And there are 2 less feet in the tent this evening. Somewhere, a prison guard gives another closed-fist speech about order. The air thins above a tent pole eviction notice while a new jumpsuit is handed to a suit tooth on a cement floor. Nikki Bass photo shoot next to gentrified housing while Noel Gallo votes to steal more fruit girl money into patrol cars. Bleach van ready to pile up bodies just to bleed corners dry for development while Gary Yee red tags another black school for prison bed construction. At least there will be clean street corners, the dirty mouth in the suit will say. At least there will be law and order. Dirt is always better when swept under a rug or onto the next encampment. And 3 tents blown on the other side of 580 will lower property value just for more protest signs to pop up and be ignored next week. But did you know there is no such thing as an empty bomb threat thrown at a black house? And Greenwood and Pine still can't move past the cement with marrow mixed in, so excuse me for taking white history seriously as I walk down these HBCU steps with the target on my back for what another white board member bans a book from speaking on. And another black mayor steps up to a podium to say, it is a shame. Or, in these troubling times. Or, we are better than this, despite all the evidence otherwise. As a matter of fact, who is we? Who be this we in the backroom meetings? Who be the we turning the wheel on the ship? Who be this we saying we are part of the problem, saying we do it to ourselves, saying we can't get respect until we respect ourselves? Who? Who does we coming sideways out your mouth talking about more pay for leeches to put up see something, say something signs, and turn around and pocket dial bomb threats to black campuses talking about we better watch our back, we better hurry up and die, we better go back now that the labor costs more than the ground meat on my back? Who? Who is we supposed to be a part of? Who is we supposed to be better than? Sitting on the left side of an abandoned building because I took white history for what it is and spoke to the remains of the last threat, shove it onto a whitewashed MLK quote, shove it onto the left hand of a Philadelphia cut short, shove it onto a Tulsa, a Rosewood, I am on pace to be called a nigger 212 times by summer. It is February. There are only 10 days left in this month and I refuse to be a corpse by the 3rd, but catch me fist closed on the 4th and I might be gone by the 5th if this white woman in power has her way. Which is the same as that white man in that seat, which is the same as that last missed check, which is the same as that eviction notice. My mother says the cloth of my ancestors makes me bulletproof. So I put on a new head wrap every time passive-aggressive headshots fire off her cradle tongues down into the gutters of unswept streets where I'm told that I belong. And I walk around with cash just in case I pass another cardboard sign, giving a fortune to crates just to see more hungry mouths the next month. It's almost like I cannot fix these encampments on my own, like starvation is intentional, like billions in surplus don't exist. Maybe by the end of this poem you can tell me what the cause is. Well, I kicked 3 more election pamphlets off my doorstep since I don't do drugs on Tuesdays ever since my neighbor overdosed on Kamala Harris bumper stickers. Meanwhile, the city of San Francisco made $90 million in parking tickets. Just to not have affordable housing, just to hire more pigs to put tickets on windshields, to pay for pigs putting tickets on windshields, and my last $60 go do the cardboard sign again. You know, a fist fight is always fair to the waistband with a gun tucked inside. You know, eviction is always fair to the feet standing on a bankroll. And my cousin told me that not all skin folk are kinfolk. So I keep 2 feet in my back pocket so I land on my feet when I'm sucker punched between line breaks and the neoliberal slides the judge lump sums to slide me into solitary silence so that a white tenured professor could tell you that these are not poems, that these are lyrics, that these are a soapbox, that they are too unhoused and must cut their hair before they deserve a home. But you know, I drag infected minds through the broken tires of my unread poems. McCarthyism smashed into my dinner plate hoping to crack the communists from my swollen red knuckles. John Ehrlichman shoulder shrugs my car upside down to the part of foothill buried in flashing patrol lights while Reaganism hovers above my neighborhood like smog in my kids' new lungs. Biden-era pen strokes flood Lake Merritt with pay stations hoping to drown out sideshows. There is blood on your overcoat, Libby. What good is a progressive leech, Libby? If I will still be 3 quarts low after the confirmation hearing confirms me to be a necessary sacrifice on the white Jesus altar of justice, harmonizing about the beauty of my execution. South Carolina firing squad triggering my last rites. Before I become a useful bullet in the throat of my comrades, an empire sells my great-grandmother's knees in the name of bombs. But I drag my lineage through dirt roads, sandstorms, scraping knees on cement cinder blocks, stacked in the way my wrist cut deeply on the journey, saltwater stinging bones shown before someone else tells me I'm healed, tells me to move on. While I drag lineage by their wrists, wiping off eraser dust mixed with diamond flakes they sold back to us, saying that's all our hands were good for. Losing limbs between borders some European gave name to, that I should be proud of, that Simbay PA revolted to come back to. Maybe my wrist bleeds on the chains he broke, just to be Spielberg in white saviorhood. I feel my lineage weighted down beneath Belongo wharf remains. Paved over, just to be paved over, just to be built atop under silk covers smelling like liberation stranglehold. While I drag my lineage to a native language, not a native language, in hopes of speaking with lineage between borders and sandstorms I was told I didn't need to know, but enough midday for struggle. I drag my lineage with dislocated wrists, separated at the broken tree branch to a tall tale pillared by monument and sand in my shoes. Meanwhile, this top chef says he is a white guy from SoCal. Says he has no culture, so he can't decide what to cook. Looking for sympathy on a plate, like I don't have sales receipts in my family tree limbs. Like my mama's 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 mama didn't have recipe claimed as family heirloom by a plantation dinner table. Chalkboard castration, telling tall tales and colorblind pillow talk about the audacity to act like percentages make you whole. Stress from repressed trauma might suffocate pops before Fruitvale becomes demolition tape, becomes parking lot burial ground, becomes museum plaque of what used to stand tall but was smothered by imperial ceremony. But what the fuck do I know? And who made saving you my problem when I'm still cast iron cut on wrist, still told to vote my way free with concessions this project paid me into, still finding white fingernails in African borders. Call it genocide again if you want to see a white nation stiffen, if you want to see what dodging a bullet does to a stuffed pocket, but throw the Mamian empire at it, and you might slow the awareness though. You might bake in enough dough for the war to rise naturally. I woke up a kidnapping victim the same day the teacher told me to put my hand on my heart. Haven't felt a beat in my own body for some time now. Might find it in colonizer pockets along with the keys to my lineage. Museum made a display of my remains, then made me pay for admission. Told me stealing is only stealing when the body can talk back. And while we're at it, I hate no oppression is in your mind, ass motherfucker. Kidnapped victims fall in love with their captors. One said, America's for sale. Another said, let's see who can assimilate best, turn grandma's scars into theme park admission, but kill the pig in you or you'll find yourself singing love songs to shackles, glorifying Secret Service breath on the back of bloodstained suit collars, and for what? So you could preach genocide for sport? So you could dance on Seneca Village ashes? I'm still trying to figure out how to be black and unsurveilled. FBI vault redacted my file just to save skin. Blood not even dry from my bullet hole yet, but you can hear the same script being prepared, no dust on the playbook when its use is constant, when capitalist hellscape must be written as hero. Tax money funding assassinations broad, but they got the audacity to act like canceling student loans is immoral. Critical thinking cut off at the knees, all for profit margin pastime. Usurper made their way into your mudroom and left blood on the hardwood. Sold you tales about freedom and patriotism, about spreading democracy, but never pick up a book and you might think Cuba is destitute. You might think Palestine is terrorist. You might think blindfolded true firing squad justice and soldiers' bullets in the back of kids is honor. Might have you high on red bait before you can even sell your labor first, before you could call healthcare equitable, before you could call capitalism meritocratic, before you step foot on occupied indigenous land and thought property tax was penance for assimilation. Before you realize we all died by poison, died by colonized textbook, died by a language that stole you from you. Stole the kneecaps from your resolve and told you plantation life was the real American dream. But a real poet told me once that not every story has to appeal to the heart, it can appeal to the spine. Severed vertebrae shouting, hear me out, from straitjacket buckles and scratches on cement walls that made my spine property of the state. That maybe 2/3 of a past the future left bloodstained baton swing, slush from bomb exploding outside what used to be my bedroom wall, just long enough for the taste of rubble to be family heirloom. Nobody even asked where I wanted my body to be buried. I am talking to this soil like everything is a weapon formed against me. Melatonin making Medgar Evers my docent on this impending bullet train. Woke up 10 times lost. Coroner can tell you jokes 3 minutes past America if you wait long enough. Might diagnose you as a rebel if you speak too loudly about the cause of death. Every 20 minutes, another puppet dies by teleprompter. Tells a revolutionary to just vote if they want change. Tucks in sheets on deathbed for preparation. Hell, how you gonna make it out alive anyway? Might as well laugh through that ash coat and lungs. We used to breathe air, now all we do is drink water and pray to the fire next time. Burning flag flapping around a body somebody deemed illegal somewhere. Drew a border and said, I dare you to cross. Let's see if your lungs have taken more air than this bullet can take from you. First step is to dare you to dream. Second step, get you to fall in love with the sound of a growling stomach. Third step, put you on a postcard sacrifice to a tree branch. What good is the poet with no neck, the coroner will joke. Only half of the half he spoke to listened anyway. And my burial plot placed center stage for encore viewing. Thank you.
No, let's picking up somebody's. Yeah, it's not off. Let's picking up somebody's music.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. So I'm our last reader for the night, and then we're going to get into a discussion. And I switched up our lineup so we could have fire and then get some water and then come into a conversation. So I hope that you enjoyed what you've heard so far, and that really that you've been able to sit with the words folks are sharing. I don't want to remember my life before mermaids. I was raised by saltwater queens, blessed by magical beings of mythic proportions, daughters of Yemeya and Gambo, those who remind me of the beautiful resilience that lives within us, coiled crowns adorned with cowrie goddesses who maintain the grace of a gazelle with the ever-changing tides, mes sirènes, my mermaid please, my grandma Genevieve, cayenne pepper royalty, celestial matriarch soft yet steady as a metronome in the kitchen, with a laugh that could brighten any dim room, unafraid of what is to come because her certainty is founded in love. Her greatest setbacks came from her. Her greatest setbacks set her up for her greatest comebacks, flowing through the roughest currents and remaining strong, flowing, crashing, rising. My mother Teresa, calming like rosemary and gentle as gardenia, earth warrior, who taught me to respect and protect the earth, to value all forms of life, holding space for her offspring and our softness, unconditionally magical, conjuring potions and stories that could transform the flu into a slight sniffle. She grew in the midst of adversity, never allowing expectation or doubt to keep her from being determined, crashing against every crashing against every doubt and expectation of determination. We're flowing, crashing, rising. Mes sirènes, my mermaid queens, cousins who remind me that I could do anything, sisters that challenge me to seek softness in signs of pain and trauma, to look at myself untarnished by a mirror of self-loathing, my aquatic angels, who kept me sane when all I thought I could ever be was crazy. Loving with our hearts wide open, guided by our gut feelings and our star signs, heureux, croyants, amants, et guerriers, dreamers, believers, lovers, and warriors, rising above black holes of doubt, insecurities, and fear, flowing, crashing, rising. I have one more. I got a little nervous up here. Got a little hot. Okay, so this next piece is called Black Girl Soldier. And I always want to just share, Black women deal with mental health in so many different ways that we don't always have space to talk about. And I want to just uplift that. We need more spaces. Our first general was underground. Railroads couldn't compare to the depths of her mind, on a mission, with a vision. Precision in the darkest cave covered by branches. Branches isolated by shame no matter where we go. The darkest storms. Uprooted black bodies, we continue to hide how we feel inside. Not equal, not well. What is being? The blood that drops, my heart that stops beating emotions and strength from this black vessel, gasping for air, craving help, someone to care, anyone to see that you are not invincible. Sold and conditioned. Hanging on by a noose with no room to break loose from the labels you didn't ask for. Martyr complex. Struggling to catch your breath under waters of expectation, bury your pain to survive. They can't relate. Dissociate. Nuclear fractures, familial disasters, armed with silence, surrounded by never-ending violence. Haven't we had enough? Faking like we're fine, struggling in pride, told to hide our wounds inside. Self-inflicted crimes, the deepest roots. Admiral abolitionist writer, wells of information filled her books on a crusade for justice, fighting to resist before a balled-up fist, truth of liberation, asphyxiation. We are the seeds from strange fruit, lemon trees in the summer breeze, hemorrhaging from the root. Under leaves of ignorance, our minds assassinated, our souls kidnapped, our bodies raped. There is no escape from the scars, this skin. When can we begin to heal, to feel, to just be free? In the caves where birds wish to sing, Harriet, Ida, Billy, Nina, shape-shifting trauma into triumph, gardenias bloom across the street. Cope or heal. Ultimately, it's all about how you deal. The deepest roots hold the darkest storms. I'm gonna invite our readers back up. No, we're gonna mask or not, I don't know. We'll see how we go. Y'all wanna distance and talk? I don't know. Okay. I want everyone to be comfortable. Yay! I'm so excited. I know, we can talk again. Yay! So for me, this feels really special. Like I said, I have had the honor of being in collectives, communities with each of these folks, and some places all together. And I really felt like this is the perfect configuration of people for us to be able to talk about not just our writing, right? Not just like what we're doing with our writing, but what liberation means to us, what that looks like. And so I just want to just kick us off with, for you, this month, 2020, Nope, we're not in 2020. Wow, I'm traveling back. Okay, so look, I'm taking us back in time, y'all. Okay, so I know, I'm sorry, y'all. With the time, actually, February 2020, I was going to Disneyland, so it's different, whole different energy. But yeah, no, 2023, y'all. I'm here, I promise. What does liberation look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like?
Go ahead, Professor.
That's you going first.
Okay, so I can kick us off, but I know each of you have a lot to say about this, so I'm like, y'all. People are here to hear me.
I think that like liberation comes and will come when people wake up. And when I say when people wake up, I think it's funny you said like February 2020.
I mean,
Because I think there was a moment where capitalism shut down, right? And everybody was stopped, everybody was at home. And because of that, there was kind of like a mass mobilization of the changing of the collective condition. And then, you know, unfortunately and unexpectedly, folks went back to doing the exact same thing, whether that's out of comfort or whether that was just out of like, all right, we did that, it's over. And I think the momentum from it was going to lead us to something better, something greater for all of us, because I think liberation comes when we focus on like the most marginalized people, and there was momentum for us to do that. And I think like over the last year and a half, like I've been, I know personally myself, kind of like mourning the idea that like, I didn't think in my lifetime that like abolition was gonna become like a mainstream conversation. And I was like, we're in it now. Like I'm over here training whole universities, right? Like on how to shift their practices, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, let's get back to making money. So I think liberation is going to come when people actually recognize that like the way that we are moving and the way that we are forced to move, given the systems and institutions that we are operating within, are eventually just going to be like our own downfall, right? They're going to be our demise, and we either have the choice to organize so that we change our collective condition, or we just continue to be rooted in this kind of poisonous individualism that's really just going to harm us all. So that's what it is for me.
Thank you.
I think for me, it looks like I'm not having to think about it in whatever way I think about it in my current identity. So like, to me, being liberated means anything as small as not having to go through the checklist I'm conditioned to go through when I'm walking alone at night, to like not having to visit my old brother every day. Like it's like in everything kind of within there. It's not looking at like my students suffering every day. So it's like it's not having to think about it, because what I imagine liberation to be now is what becomes like our lived reality. And I think I'm still doing a lot of dreaming and imagining of what that looks like, but that to me is just kind of like the central feeling of it, is that it's not a word that means what it means right now.
Yeah, thank you for
I'll represent the old school and say that liberation is a transformation of the mode of production and the dismantling of this murderous ruling class apparatus, a transformation of this kind of superstructure understanding that we're not in a kind of like, what's that, what is the island? Right. Various fields, right? That, oh, this is the world of education, and it can be transformed on its terms, and this is the world of policing, and it can be transformed on its terms, and this is the medical reality that can be transformed. To see that it really all fits one great social contradiction between oppressor and oppressed, and how we all line up according to that, or how we survive, try to do our best to survive that contradiction, and also, unfortunately, how we build our perceptions of ourselves in line with that social contradiction. Like, in the meantime, I think, what would be a kind of groovy corner we could turn is if we lived in a more of a revolutionary process. So, like, the good news, and it's something kind of like what poetry would teach you. You don't have to kind of get to the destination of enlightenment to synthesize a groovy line, or have a nice little moment with language. It's almost just the intention, the walk towards, insight will land you places. And I think similarly, it's not even necessarily like, oh, okay, the destination of, okay, on this day, I no longer live alienated from myself and my labor, and my identity and my safety. But for this next 6 months or this year, we're really gonna live in a collective process of going about setting things right and just incorporating movement reality into your day in, day out praxis, which is highly inspirational, and sustaining in its food, in itself.
Thank you all for your answers, and I love how I just love the thread between, y'all, it was all in a chorus of really bringing us back to the root, right? Of how it's connected. We're all so interconnected that it's, from the babies to our elders, that there's so much more that we can all be doing. And so just thinking about for y'all, what are some practices that you engage in that feel, good for you?
Follow in the same order?
Let's flip it.
Yeah, you go.
Let's go.
Elders first,
That's not how it goes. I think kind of what is it's almost like different, or there are kind of basics we can stick to. So if we're talking about like a revolutionary project, it's really just a human project, And it's just, are we lucky to also be writers, because it makes, the feedback is more instant, So, but I find that, while we might make these, we might be kind of these groovy, almost like, have the appearance of like being, a singular type of thing. Here's groovy revolutionary poets and that. Actually, what it comes down to is doing right by even more kind of fundamental building blocks of praxis. So I have to say, like, for me, keeping a nice thread of just kind of internal cultivation, right? Making myself gentler to myself and others. Right? And how that, and how that plays out. A lot of meditation for me is groovy. Making sure of a sound political praxis, and doing right by that. Not try, basically what I'm kind of campaigning for right now is for us to not try to bend our comfort zones, or not bend our praxis to our comfort zone. and to make sure, like, okay, that, you know, a political path requires a certain diligence, or a human path, a quest to humanize yourself and understanding that you can't humanize yourself without the humanization of all. It requires, you know, just kind of what we do well with the diligence, but along with what I've been finding interesting lately around political praxis is just having various, actually participating in various unities. Like, so we have, you know, like right now I think Mumia has it's gonna be an important ruling any day now. You know, that, what's that DA? Krasner?
Yeah.
Turned over 5 boxes of new evidence, including like one of the witnesses, you know, hitting the DA up for money. You know what I mean? Right? So right now we have this kind of, his situation is heightening, and so they're organizing efforts around the Bay. Actually, fun fact, his grandson is here and doing organizing work in the Bay right now. So we have that to participate in. We also have, you know, other collectives that, you know, want to take on the struggle more broadly, or share more kind of like principles in common. So then you also have, you know, other, you know, just kind of coalition efforts where, you know, we don't even have to be from the same planet, but can still line up enough to work collectively. So I found that, like, lately, just, you know, not trying to have the, you know, okay, this organization right here, so but to, you know, to engage anybody who wants to engage with something humanizing together. That's what I've been getting miles out of.
I think right now I practice trying to stay alive, which is very challenging. I think even without being in struggle or believing in the value of the struggle, like just personally, you know, I have a lot of mental health challenges, things that make it really hard to just kind of sustain a day-to-day life. So I think I spend a lot of time right now just trying to like become well enough to last, you know, to become well enough to have some sort of longevity, to believe in the value of taking care of myself, drinking water, you know, all those sorts of things. That's probably top priority. I think something that's also really significant to me is I stay close to younger people. You know, I work in middle schools, I work with high schoolers now, and showing up for them every day, listening to them, watching them, just being with them, I think is a really critical reminder of how important it is to stay in it and to not try to opt out or take myself out. You know, like it's just like you have to be here. Because even though sometimes it's a struggle to feel like I am lying to these kids every day, like going to college is not gonna stop, not nothing. Like, but at the same time, like I also believe that college was hella fun. And like more people should be able to access it. So trying to balance those contradictions. And then I think I feel in a lot of ways like a late bloomer, which I know that's not how it works, and like however you come to the work, whenever you come to it, that's valid. But I feel like a late bloomer. Like there's a lot that I didn't grow up with, a lot that wasn't surrounding me, and I had to kind of teach myself. And I feel like I'm still in that process. And sometimes it's with not knowing what you don't know, trying to build praxis is challenging. But right now, honestly, my top priority is the practices that keep me able to wake up and get out of bed.
I think an important one is, I think, therapy. I think there was an interesting conversation around like, you know, folks are kind of talking about reparations, whatever. And this idea of if you give like a monetary value to these people, you say like, all right, we paid you, so it's cool, right? And the idea to me, like I think therapy is essential. I've said this for a pretty long time. I think that all Black people should have access to free, unlimited therapy. I think that all men and men-identifying people should be required to be in therapy. And I think the practice of kind of like understanding like how we came to be like the way we are ultimately is going to like help us become more like collective, more empathetic, more understanding, because we live every day within practices that kind of devalue collectivity, right? And they value collectivity in the sense of like, well, this is the neighborhood watch, and we're gonna call on any person that doesn't look like they belong here, right? Because this is our neighborhood, but not a collective like idea of like caring for your community and like not having to resort to these systems that were put in place to like literally take Black people back to plantations or squash labor rebellions. So I think like understanding ourselves, like therapy is huge, I think, for me. And also on that idea, like learning, I am an educator, so I think not even institutional education, but the idea, and that's when I said like there was a very real, what felt like a very real, I can't say how real or tangible, but there was a very real feeling effort at folks trying to understand ideas and systems that were in place a couple years ago. And that meant like people actually trying to understand, all right, like white supremacy is real. Like how do I perpetuate that? And like what are the things that I can do, right? And everyone's always looking for a checklist. Well, I do this, right? But really, it's a matter of like, for me, it's about constantly unlearning. Like I always say, I am always gonna replicate patriarchal harms that I'm not aware of, right? But like, it's a constant process for me to be able to be like, you know what? I did do that. And like, how can I help to like repair that harm and then figure out how to not do that again? I think like there aren't enough ways for folks, or there aren't enough people who want to do that, I don't think, at least from what I see. It's always, we live in a retaliatory society, and like the idea of taking care means like, well, eye for an eye, you come with my stuff, I'm gonna mess you up, right? Instead of like, okay, I need to forgive you for this really terrible harm that was caused, but like, how do we prevent that harm from, one, becoming your entire identity, but two, keep that from happening again and making it like a learned experience. And to me, I'm like always trying to think about that. And again, therapy. But I think therapy, reading, and like really importantly is I have an almost 2-year-old, and like when you and I think like kind of like staying close to the youth, right? Like I think when you do interact with like young folks regularly, like I worked in high schools, I worked in middle schools, I worked at a college, and when you interact with young folks, you realize like young folks, like we don't really give enough credit to young people. We often assume that young folks are just like, oh, they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know what they're talking about, right? But like, young folks are really brilliant, and especially you see it in like really small kids. I was talking, my mom is right here, by the way. I was talking, like on the way here, you know, we were talking about like just like how like smart, not to brag, but like how smart like my kid is, and it's just a matter of like the children are sponges, as my mom would say. And so like all the things that folks pick up, like when we talk about these systems of like labor, talk about systems of white supremacy, patriarchy, like these imperialist practices, like all of these things are things people pick up, right? Like they're things that they learn, that they're taught, that they are intentionally removed or like intentionally not taught. That's why, you know, that's why Florida is a dangerous place, right? Like, and that happens here too. But like, the youth are really malleable, but they're also like really brilliant, right? Like, and so to me, I think like remaining that connection with like being in educational symbiosis with young folks, like they teach me stuff every day, right? And also, like I can teach them, but kind of remaining in that symbiosis helps me be like, you know what, this was a great day. Like you learned this thing also, like you little person, like you learned how to say grandma looks beautiful today, right? You know what I'm saying? Like there's like a purity about it, and we like lose that when we get older. I'm jaded, but like we lose that when we get older because of all the things we experience, and so like being able to kind of like maintain that does help that hope, and like it does help you recognize like, you know what, there is like a possibility that y'all can create a better version of this place that, you know, we have sadly destroyed. But
yeah, but I think what you're saying is kind of what everyone else has said too, is like we have opportunities to become students, right? To be constant learners, lifelong learners in different practices. Tongo, I heard you try to clown me, because usually when I ask this question, I'm like, what self-care practices are you doing? And that's usually, no, you looked at me, it was a moment. But you know, I think that it's important that we really like talk about how we keep ourselves in multiple ways. Okay.
I was really like interested in what actually started. Like, I was really interested in what your answer to the first question. Like what is liberation?
Look, like I asked the question like that. You know, for me, I think that it exists in multiple realms, right? That it's interconnected, and I really just think about how y'all are saying, like, my students remind me of that. Like, I think that it's a collective process that is creative. I think that it's like so much more than we see it as. I think we're inundated with violence, and so we assume that liberation is violence. And that's not, in my mind, immediately what the thing is, but you know, there's different interpretations of the word always. But yeah, I think it's a collective process of learning and unlearning through whatever means. And so for me lately, it's been working with high school girls and gender expansive youth. And so being able to hold that space for them matters to me because the world doesn't, right? The world tells them that they have to go become a cookie cutter version of themselves. So really being able to hold that space is for me like just an act, small act of liberation. Okay, so do we have any questions for each other? I don't know, okay. So I'm gonna open it up, get maybe 2 questions from the audience. Do you have any questions for us? Jackie?
Did you talk about your self-care?
No.
Oh, I didn't. Meilani's like, so yeah, for me, I'm trying to think. It's really hanging out with my cat. Her name is Venus. And she's just calming, which is so funny, but yeah, it's really finding the like, I don't know, the joy in the mundane And I look over at her, I'm like typing on my computer, she's knocked out. And I think that, you know, just having those moments to stop and breathe, I think that every day, personally, I'm like, dang, am I gonna make it? Like, this is like uphill battles, and then I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like if I get present, if I can be here right now, if I can, you know, take a moment to drink some water instead of going off on somebody, you know, if I could just think about the things that bring me joy, being around people that bring me joy. And again, learning. I'm such a nerd, so I love to just like, you know, read. I love to be able to learn something new. Yes, Mama Cynthia.
I am interested in knowing, or you guys responding to this question to this audience, what would it mean to remove Black history?
What would it mean to remove Black history?
If you have people of other nationality in the audience, you have Florida that wants to remove, you guys tell us, or tell others, what would it mean to remove Black history? Sometimes when you explain to somebody and they're asked amongst their other friends, they will have a conversation. They'll know why it's important and why it can't be removed and why there would be no America without it.
Right.
So that's just my take, that since you guys have this forum, you guys tell us.
What would it mean to remove Black history?
Look.
Look.
Go ahead with the answer there.
But no, I think it's something for us to think about. I don't even think we have as much Black history as we should have in this country. So for there to be things taken away is like, what are we doing personally? I was blessed that my mom was like, y'all don't know about who you are early. So we were going to Allensworth, you know, seeing Black towns, you know, like she was having us in libraries. She was having us, you know, in spaces where we were gonna know who we were, even if our school wasn't telling us. And I think that is, for me, I think that's where we need to move to. Like, I don't think we should just be expecting our schools to be able to hold everything for us. And so, yeah, I think that it's unthinkable. And I was actually just talking to someone from Florida on the way here, and she was like, we can't even talk about culture in the classroom at all. And that's wild. So, I mean, I don't know, what do y'all think? There's a lot of that. A lot of shit. Look, everybody's like,
Oh, yeah, you got it.
I think that I'm trying to have so little loyalty to our government, like the things that it sets up as like, you know, flag posts, memorials, where I'm trying to have so little loyalty to that wouldn't deter me from where it is I'm trying to go. Like, to me, the conversation is more about, you know, like Black folks are still getting killed by police in February. Like, you know, when it is Arab American Heritage Month, like folks are still being harassed for wearing their hijab. Like that's, so it's just like these kind of celebratory types of things. We know that we will celebrate regardless. Like we know that we'll teach each other, we'll need to teach each other regardless. And so what like politicians, policymakers decided was the appropriate time to be like extra happy about being Black. If that didn't exist anymore, because I'm happy every day, but like sure, if anyways. But it's, I think for me, it's just kind of like, it's like, not like it wouldn't matter, but I want it to not be like a big kind of pool of energy spent on that particular topic, because then we also see that they'll take whatever they want to when they want to. So it's like having investment in that, like having belief in that, doesn't feel quite like where I want to put my energy.
So I think there's a legitimate danger in removing Black history. There's a legitimate tangible danger, which is why it's an issue. I know folks watch The Daily Show, like D.L. Hughley on there said it was intentional for like white captors to remove the history from enslaved folks and to not be able to teach it. And it is now intentional to not teach a history that shows that that history was removed. And so there is an actual tangible danger for sure. I also will acknowledge, like, relying on the institution of K through 12 schooling to educate kids, white kids, black kids, brown kids, about Black history is a very futile endeavor, because, you know, the title of soapbox. The title of the book is called, like my book, it's called No Bedtime Stories of Soil, and the truth of the matter is, like, this place, this country, was founded on land theft and genocide and enslavement, right? So it's founded on these three things that is factual. And so the United States makes concentrated efforts to not recognize that that is what the history of the country is, and instead say it was like, we're all a nation of immigrants, we're all, right? But, so there's a tangible danger, but also like relying on the institution of schooling to teach like 6th graders and 5th graders and 4th graders, like, you know, they used to have lynch parties, right? Like Tongo's line, like, I'm reading lynch mob, what is it, lynch mob tea leaves, like shoestrings, right? Like, they're not gonna teach that, right? Like, there's never gonna be a thing. And, you know, there's a time I was cleaning with my mom when I was like 10 years old, I think it was. And I was cleaning and I didn't know who the NAACP was. And she was like, you what? She said. And I remember specifically, she gave me a piece of paper and made me sit at the table while she was cleaning and writing lines like, national event, right? Like writing it out. And I had to do it 100 times. And so like the idea that the school is gonna be the one that's gonna be like, have you read Walter Rodney, right? Like, have you read Frantz Fanon? Have you read about the history of people, right? Like, have you read like all of these things? Is not gonna happen. And so, but the removal of it and the idea, like in Alabama, they just had one student BSU said they weren't able to talk about anything in the country before 1970, right? And so like, again, like it's intentional, obviously it's intentional, policies are intentional, there's a legitimate danger in it for a reason, and it is not gonna take Black people for centuries have always had to be like, listen, y'all, this is gonna send us down a terrible direction. We need this, this, or this. And then later after the fact, they're like, you know, Martin Luther King was a good person, right? But like, he was the most hated person in America, right? He was an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. Then they decided to kill him. But like, now all of a sudden the FBI is like, in honor of Martin Luther King. So like, they're not, the institutions themselves are not gonna do that. Like, it has to be on, like, Black people have always tried to do it, but like, it has to be on like non-Black people to be like, hey y'all, here's this book on how to be anti-racist. Here's this book on Black history. Here's this book on what actually happened in 1845 on this plantation. Like, you know, like, so, that has to confronting like how we got here and confronting like the reality of it is just part of it, and folks really just are uncomfortable with confronting the reality because it distorts like, you know, comfort. And so relying on the institution itself is not, but there is legitimate danger. So it's kind of both, right?
I think we see your hand, man, for just 1 second.
Okay, yeah. He's gonna finish this one question.
I just real quick, I think the mistake we make is overweighting our interpretation of whiteness as privilege, a spectrum of privilege or participation, and not looking at, you know, whiteness as really more of a deputization, and that, you know, what would become white people is a project of creating a big enough buffer to perpetually suppress African revolt here. As this capitalist system continues to operate now in permanent crisis, you have forces who have decided or predicted, been working on this for a long time, that capitalism would best be saved by creating a kind of a neo-confederacy, where you have actually, you know, all of these white people have no real business playing along with the current system. So in order to keep them high enough to participate, we ramped up. When you look at the Trumpism, when you look at January 6th, when you look at Buffalo, when you look at Ahmaud Arbery, all you see is this growing neo-Confederate wave that actually is global. As globally, there's these rightward marches and all of these so-called first world countries. What you see in like a Florida will be here, right? Because, you know, that's how the devil workshops, right? So it's like, okay, they got the least resistance out there. Like, recall, you know, the Proud Boys and all that came here as soon as they could. Before gentrification was so vicious, you know, they would never, you know what I mean? But as soon as the ground was fertile, they're here. Just because right now the way this kind of like tokenism is or really the attempt to get black people to buy into neoliberalism, I say, hey, you could be the president too, or you could be the vice president too. They need us here to play along, so okay, don't worry, y'all. We won't let the black studies go in California. But as soon as they can, it will be gone. Really, as soon as they can, we will be dead, right? And so when you look at, especially when you look at kind of like the ebb and flow of white supremacy, as it, you know, when it becomes more ostentatious, more consolidated, when it pronounces itself, when it recedes, it's all of these repeating patterns. But now they have actually turned the corner, and white supremacist movements, or the white supremacist really nature of the system, can now survive conditions that it couldn't survive before. So now that it can move even more and more boldly. The mistake we make is thinking that this is not actually perpetual war against it, right? And so, you know, it's almost what I would campaign for us is just to really come to terms with the true nature, again, of social contradiction. And how do we have to educate ourselves and fight, you know, really using what's really just a kind of like your eyeball, you know what I mean? So, it's bad.
Thanks, y'all. Yes. We got our last question back, sir.
It's not really a question, but I've taught history in Livermore here for 40 years. And I can talk about grandfather clauses and things that were done to discriminate against blacks in terms of voting, but it's more powerful to do lessons where the kids can experience what it must have felt like. So trying to do role plays and simulations to make them feel what people might have felt in years before. I got my hands somehow on a Georgia State literacy test that black people had to pass to vote. And some teacher gave that to me at a workshop. And so I said my class, when you get to be 18 and you get ready to vote, you have to pass a certain test on knowledge of the government to be able to vote. I was lying to them to set this lesson up. And so I said, you can miss 10 of these 30 questions and still be able to vote. And so I started asking these really hard questions which were on the test. I said things like, what is your county site number? Who's the county sheriff? All these intricate, these obscure offices, they ask these people to label and identify, and things about government that I would never know. And after a while, the kids are going, I don't know any of this stuff. I said, you can miss 10, don't give up. And I kept going and going, and questions got harder and harder. And finally, the kids were like, I'm never gonna vote. They were totally discouraged from voting because they couldn't answer the questions in the test, which of course is what the test was designed to do to people in Georgia who are black. And so finally, after the kids are getting really fed up, I really build it up so they get really angry and frustrated. I said, I gotta be honest with you, I was just making this up. This is a real test given to black people in Georgia, but not to white people, you know? And they're like, what? And it hit them so hard, they couldn't even fathom how that could have been gotten away with, that they could have used that tool to prevent people from voting. And it's always been a really powerful lesson for me, that they could try to experience what it felt like to look at a future where they wouldn't be able to vote because they couldn't feel like they could pass a test. And of course later I told them they don't have to pass a test to vote in California, but some people did in certain states like Georgia for many years. And they couldn't overcome that hurdle, they couldn't vote. And so those kind of lessons were always ones that I think stuck more and more powerful from my students, a lot of which were white, wouldn't have really experienced that kind of thing in their real educational careers.
Well, I got a new game. No.
It's like, what is it? What should we do? Yours would be a little chaotic.
We should beat them up. No.
Yeah,
Don't get the Livermore School District.
No, that's something that we showed them when we were watching the Eye on the Prize series, and they showed the guy trying to show how to take blows and cover up and get kicked and how to defend yourself. And the kids were like, what? He said, they had to teach how to do that? Yeah, because they got punched and kicked and beaten up, and they had to learn how to protect themselves. And so they weren't getting kicked themselves, but they could see what that was like a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick, I promise? When I was young, I'm 65, okay, so.
All right,
Yeah.
still young.
Right. Well, when I was a youngster in junior high school, and then we got into the 60s and 70s, and I was so idealistic, you know, and I thought, you know, I'm going to change the world so that it's a better place for my children. It might not be good now, but maybe by the time I grow up and I have children, if I try to change the world and try to do whatever little thing I can do to be a good person, the world will be a better place. Then I had children, and the world had not changed very much. We had a lot of stuff that was covered up, but the world itself never really changed. So as a mother of 3 black children in America, I decided that it was my duty to inform my children of what was out there. Not to scare them, but so that they would be prepared and not surprised when it came and they would be able to deal with it. I'm always a person that likes to see a problem and try to find out a solution, or to try and be prepared for whatever's going to come my way, if I can. And here we are in 2023. Never in my wildest dreams did this 13-year-old idealistic young person think that in 2023 we would be where we are today. So much hatred unleashed, so much animosity, you know, from all around. So I told my kids that the history of this country, that racism is so ingrained in the society of this country, in the blood of this country, that, and I really, it hurt my heart to have to tell them this. It's never going to go away. It's always going to be here. What I can teach you is how to deal with it when it comes. And I think that's something that we can still do, is to not be discouraged because it's gone, it's not gone, but learn how to deal with it. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do when we're faced with this situation, how do we survive this? And how do your children survive this? And that's what I hope to pass on to my children, and I hope my children will pass on to theirs. Maybe one day they won't need to do that, you know, that there's still that 13-year-old idealistic child in me that wishes things will be better. But that realism came to me as I became an adult, you know, but I was so idealistic. You know, we had the Jetsons, right? Like, oh, someday we're gonna be doing that. In the
are.
And here we are.
Thank you so much for that, for closing us off with that comment. I think that it's important for us to continue to think about not just how we survive, but also how we move towards shifts, right? How we move towards spaces that we don't feel like we just have to get through. So thank you all for making time to be here tonight. Thank you all for really being present, for holding space, for always just showing up, showing love.
And thank Alie.
Yeah.
And so much love to the Livermore Library and Tri-Valley for Black Lives. So please check out their table. They have a Juneteenth, when's the event? June 17th. I'm sorry, I'm bad at dates. June 17th, y'all. It was great. I mean, every time I've gone, it's been really wonderful. Go this year. I love that we know about it now, so you can mark your calendar, don't make any plans. Just go. All right. Good night, y'all.